Producers, why are we selling beats for $500 exclusively when we should be selling them for $5 million? I mean, so what if an artist is only making $20 an hour at their day job? We should be still getting 10 million per beat at least, right? I know I'm being sarcastic right now, but I do hear this narrative a lot. I mean, mostly on the internet. You hear all types of weird, wild stuff on the internet, but this narrative that producers are underpaid, which I think by and large we are, and not just underpaid, but maybe underappreciated in a lot of scenarios, but we also have quite a bit of influence and leverage these days, especially. And I was one of those people that was running around trying to, convince recording artists to pay me for beats and feeling really bad when they simply wouldn't. And when they would tell me stuff like, well, I can just get someone to make these beats for free down the street from here, or I can just go online and get these beats for, 12 for $5 in a package. It hurt my soul and broke my spirit. And then I also went online and was reading, before I got involved in the music industry, I was reading all these, forum posts about how big time producers were making $500,000, $2 million per beat, whatever it was. Of course, these posts were created by people who weren't actually there looking at the amounts on those checks. Why let facts get in the way of a good Reddit post, right? So very recently I was reading a thread where a producer told a story about how he quoted a rapper a price for his production, and it was so high that the rapper seemed shocked. I was shocked reading it, and I shared it, and a lot of people in the producer community either thought the guy was crazy or thought he was completely justified. I want to know what you think after reading this, and I want to know what you do. Drop a comment. What do you do when an artist from your area who's not some high budget artist, not even signed to an independent label, let alone a major, comes up and asks you what your prices are for a beat? Or let's say you've sent them beats and now it's time to talk business. What do you do? And I asked Dame and Aaron, because they not only manage artists and run record labels, but they've worked on independent, unsigned, and major label artist projects. So they know how these negotiations go. The link to the new podcast channel is below. We appreciate the support of all the people checking out our episodes. Thank you for watching and for sharing your insight in the comments. Someone asked me to produce them yesterday. I told him $5,000 and the rapper seemed shocked. My comment was, it doesn't seem like you care about making money, so you're doing the right thing. I don't mean that as a dig. I just mean, I genuinely think, well, I'll explain what I think, but Sage Francis chimed in, and Sage Francis has been a career rapper since I was in high school. You know what I mean? This guy has been doing it. He said, to be fair, that's a shocking number. And he points out why do you think, given that you've never produced anyone, you can start at that high of a price tag? On the one hand, people were saying this dude's not going to make any money, because I shared this and looked at some of the comments that I received. Some people were saying, well, clearly that's a fuck you price. That's what I was getting at. I think that was a fuck you price, and he was just kind of sharing a situation. It's almost like Reddit, am I the asshole? And, I don't think you're an asshole for it, but I think you gave him the fuck you price, because if you cared about making money, I think this guy probably has a day job and he's making money doing something else. So that's all I meant. I don't think he cares about making money off of this interaction. Because if he did, then he's doing it wrong, but it didn't feel that way. On the other side of the spectrum, though, people were saying this producer, this is a narrative that producers will say, the producer doesn't work for you, the producer works for himself, or, his price is his price. All right. I think all sides are right, but based on the outcome, right? In my experience, I'll say these three things, or these two things. Number one, producers do work for themselves, but our job is to produce. So if an artist contacts us to produce a song, we are working for them in a business sense and then working with them in a creative sense. So I don't feel this sense of independence, this hyper independence, if you're paying me. I'm going to do what I can do to make sure that you get what you're paying for. If you pay me, I'm on contract with you. And number two, if a business isn't flexible in the right ways, it's going to break, just like a brittle tree in a windstorm. Obviously, if you're Timbaland, you're not selling a beat for $5,000 or for $500, let alone $5,000. But if your budget is $500, you don't even have access to Timbaland. You know what I mean? So if you're an artist who has access to me, like I'm talking about myself here, I've gotten 30,000 for a beat before. That was from a major label. That's from a multi-billion-dollar entity, multi-billion-dollar corporate entity. If my friend from high school, who's an aspiring artist who lives in an apartment down the street from me, asked me for a beat, I could tell him I need 10,000 for a beat. Or you know what? I've gotten 30K before. I need 30K from you. Knowing damn well he makes 30K a year. Why would I do that? Unless I'm financially free, I'm going to lose my livelihood with that attitude and with that revenue model. I have no problem getting $500 for a beat from an unsigned artist. Even if I spend a full 8-hour day working with that artist, break that down. That's $60 an hour, over $60 an hour. That's a 6-figure income. You know what I mean? So why would I act like a superstar around these people? One of the comments that I received said 5K is nothing for those who take their craft seriously. And I was like, you can take your craft seriously, but if you don't have the income, it's not even possible. So I don't understand this sentiment. It says, nowadays, these artists become millionaires off one song going viral. So why shouldn't the producer at least get a few thousand up front and publishing on the back end? Producers, stop selling yourself short, especially if you've invested thousands, blah, blah, blah. Look, I'm a producer advocate. I want producers to win. I don't think this is the attitude that is going to allow us to win. So two scenarios. Dame, you're still running a record label, and maybe you're going to start running a record label soon, based on what you said earlier. An artist turns in their album. There's a beat by a new producer on it. That producer has never been paid for a beat ever. It's a great song. You want it to go on an album. What happens next, and what do you expect the producer to do?
Typically it's negotiated up front, like what we pay for beats. I think for Funk Volume, when we first started, it was like, Hop produced almost all of his stuff. But when we started working with Dizzy, who didn't produce his stuff, I think we paid like $500. I don't think we ever paid over like $1,500 for a beat. It was always like $500 to $1,500. And then you get obviously your publishing and royalties. That was at that time. I think, over time, like fair changes over time. Like even the artist deals that we did were super fair for the moment. If it was the same time today, it'd probably have to be even more in the artist's favor, right? And I think producers, same way. I think producers, we're just kind of coming out of the era where like producers just get like 3%, royalty rate, right? I think that changes over time too. I think producers should get more than 3% of a record. But in any situation, I think that you should never, like after the fact, you should always have an idea, even if it's not in writing, of like what we're working for here, right? Like even when I worked with you before, Payne, I told you like this is what the structure is going to be. I don't want you doing hella work and then we get to negotiating and then we're not on the same page on like what, at least in some type of range of where this is going to shake out in terms of compensation for the producers. Like, so the communication just has to be on point. I think this cat was like it doesn't sound like he wants to produce other people. That's how I read it. I just read it like, cause sometimes I think even Hop said that before. It's like, okay, now cause a lot of artists don't like doing like features, even though they get paid a lot of money for them. At some point it's just like, all right, tell him my feature price is $100,000. Just so that he doesn't have to do it. That's how I received the initial message. So I didn't.
Yeah, the fuck you price. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't. I wouldn't even have commented or engaged because it was pretty clear to me that he just doesn't want to produce for other people, and that's fine. That's the
energy I got. Yeah. So okay, second scenario then for both of you. You're both managing an artist, which you've both done and continue to do. They're paying for their own beats. They're not signed to a label. Everything's out of pocket. Maybe they're at the 250,000 streams a month level. They want to drop a single with a brand new producer who has no experience selling beats. What are you doing on your end business wise? And what do you expect from the producer business wise?
You're saying paperwork or like
anything business wise, like especially when you're interacting, because you got to reach out. You probably have to do some negotiating. How is the producer conducting themselves in an ideal situation?
In my experience, a lot of times working with new producers with my artists at that rate, the producer is just hyped that the artist wants to get a track from them. And then I'm like, yo, how much do you charge? And they're usually like, typically 50, or they'll be like, man, I really want $150. And I'll be like, okay, we're going to give you 400, or we'll give you 500. You know what I'm saying? Or sometimes it depends, because I had a signed artist at that rate, and we just kind of had a personal internal thing that we weren't going to pay. If it was a single and she was working with a new artist, we wouldn't pay less than 500. If it was just kind of like a drop track, we wouldn't pay less than 250 or 300, just from an integrity standpoint. Because it's like, you're not going to make royalties like you think you are, because this artist is signed. It's going to take a minute to recoup. You're making 2% on the record. You know what I'm saying? It's like nothing. Let's give you something. And then if it was going to be a single, typically she wouldn't rock with a new artist, or a new producer. But if she did, it was typically between 1,000 and 1,500. But if they're a brand new producer, same thing. She do between like 500 and 750 for the love. But I do have several other unsigned artists who were slightly bigger than that, who would just be like, I'm paying 250. My regular guys do 250, but they would also be breaking bread. They would be giving like, like a fourth of the record in points or whatever to the producer, and there's no label involved. So there's going to be a recoup. So I do know, like, it would typically be like, hey, what do you want? I ask that because I just want to see where they're at. Then I'd be like, okay, this is what we're going to give you, or this is what we have. Let me know your thoughts. And then we would talk about points or master royalties. We would talk about, publishing. Again, with the independent guys, they actually, a couple of them wouldn't even give the full 50%. Some of them would be like, I'll give you 40% because you're going to get X, Y, and Z. I would like the extra 10%. I didn't necessarily agree with that, but like, this is why I don't work with artists anymore. And then, you do the publishing, sound exchange, LOD, paperwork for all the split sheet. And then, just typically either an email or on the split sheet, I would add, this is how much we're paying for the beat. I get all of their paperwork or their payment information. I email that to them, because typically I'm texting them or talking to them on the phone. I email that over to them. They email it signed back. Then the money gets transferred, and then the beat gets transferred. It's pretty like simple. I mean, I feel like I talked for a long time, but pretty simple. It's just like negotiate the price, figure out the splits, figure out the publishing, get an LOD for sound exchange, and then pretty much that's it, I think.
I've given the advice to producers all the time where you just need to break down what your financial goals are. If you want to make $50,000 a year, how much do you have to make per week or per month or per day? And then take that into account when you're pricing your beats. What's the hourly rate on $50,000 a year? Just start informing yourself with actual tangible numbers, and then you don't have to, because I think a lot of producers panic, like producers who want to make music, not the guy in the post, but to those of you, if you're watching this, you probably want to make money as a producer. Don't just pull numbers from the sky. You get real nervous when someone says, how much do you charge? We're like, oh shit, I don't know. It helps to have some sort of reference point. I'm not saying that has to be the final price. In your mind, your final price might be 300, and you offer that to Erin, and she says, you know what, I'll give you 4. Or your price might be 500, but then you negotiate down to 3 because you realize, well, hey, I'm making $300 for a beat that I spent 4 hours on. Based on my calculations of my financial goals, this is still in line with that. If someone's like, oh, I'll give you $50 for this beat, like,